jurisdiction is reacting to the San Bernardino attack. While the FBI has now labeled this massacre terrorism, the White House has not yet done the same. And just last night, with 14 people dead in California, Attorney General Loretta Lynch spoke to a different fear.
Since the tragic attacks in Paris 3 weeks ago, there's been a decidedly disturbing uptick in anti-Muslim rhetoric. It's been very divisive, and many of us, frankly, feel that the rhetoric is the worst that it's ever been.
The fear that you have just mentioned is, in fact, my greatest fear as a prosecutor, as someone who is sworn to the protection of all of the American people, which is that the rhetoric will be accompanied by acts of violence.
Joining me now, presidential candidate and Republican senator from the state of Florida, Marco Rubio. Senator, thank you very much for being with us tonight. And so your reaction to how the White House has handled this so far?
Inexplicable, really. First of all, from the very first instances after this happened, they, like most people on the left, immediately jumped on this whole gun control argument without knowing any of the facts about this case, just immediately jumped on that, and they've continued banging the drum of gun control up until today, when, as every hour went by, the indications were greater and greater that this was a terrorist act, and we now know that it was, irrespective of whether the White House or not has acknowledged it yet. It continues to be the case that as evidence comes out, we now know it's a terrorist act. They didn't even wait. They immediately jumped on it as just another example of another mass killing, and this is why we need gun control, completely ignoring that none of the laws that they're proposing would have done anything to prevent this shooting or any of the previous shootings that they've cited or pointed to.
What do you make of the Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who comes out today, doesn't even call it a terrorism investigation? It took the FBI director sitting next to her to say that. At the same time, she's sending a message to Muslim groups last night saying she will make sure that any hateful rhetoric against Muslims is looked into. I was like, she says, oh, by the way, we do have the First Amendment, but I'm going to look into that.
Well, first of all, the problem that we have with them is they refuse to continue to acknowledge that we are at war with radical jihadists. Second is they have this narrative going. It's the same thing that led to the lies about Benghazi. This narrative that somehow this problem is contained, that we don't have anything to worry about, that ISIS is the JV team, that we're not in any danger. And so they continue to want to pretend as if this is not a major issue the way it is, and they refuse to acknowledge that we're engaged in a war on terror. And so that is my problem with them, apart from all the other policy mistakes that they're making, is that they continue not to call these things for what they are, because it counters a political narrative that they're trying to further, which is that there's no war on terror here.
How much danger are we in?
So we have two major issues that we're facing. One is they are inserting they're inserting fighters into Europe. I think Jordan is going to be a country they're going to target here very soon from some large-scale attacks. And they would like to use the refugee crisis to insert fighters here in America and terrorists here in America. But there's a second problem, and one we've never really faced before up until the last few years: the homegrown violent extremist, the individual, perhaps born and raised in the United States, who has never exhibited any sort of ideological leanings towards terrorism.
That's this guy.
And then suddenly they become rapidly exactly. He became rapidly radicalized and turned that into action. And this is why they put out magazines like Dabiq, their online publication. They are looking to inspire attacks in the West. Individuals, they don't necessarily coordinate with them, but they are telling them how to attack, and they're inspiring them to attack. And those are the hardest ones to find, because you just don't see them coming.
But it's like you have to find the direct communication between al-Baghdadi, who's running ISIS, and the individual here in the United States now, in order for the administration to say, this is clearly terror. There doesn't have to be that direct link, does there?
There doesn't, and that's the point. There's a homegrown violent extremists. They're not individuals that are receiving an order to attack this certain place at a certain time, a certain way. What they are doing is they are getting mass information through propaganda, online, and other methods that inspire them not just to attack, but suggest ways to attack. They've talked about targeting servicemen and women, military facilities, but they've also talked about targeting soft targets, anywhere you can get away with the killing of maximum number of people. And that is the threat that is continuing to grow. The homegrown violent extremists, there are active investigations open in virtually every field office that the FBI has in this country. It is a threat unlike anything we have ever faced, and it is rapidly growing. And each one of these attacks makes the next attack even more likely, because of copycats that are inspired to try to do the same thing.
Senator, thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, meet a woman shot 3 times in that conference room Wednesday and hear how she managed to survive.